Welcome to the Catholic Mom Book Club. This is week 2 of A Beautiful Second Act, Saints and Soul Sisters Who Taught Me to Age with Grace by Maria Johnson. From Ave Maria Press. To learn more about purchasing a copy of this incredible book yourself, go to catholicmom.com. We also have replays of week 1 and eventually, at the end of today, replays of week 2. Maria, how does it go?
It goes well.
I've had a long day. English and I are going to struggle today. I'm just going to start right there. But how does it go?
We can do it in Spanish or Portuguese. Pick one.
I think I just went back to my Dick and Jane days of first learning how to read. Anyway, but we're going to go, gratefully, we have a more prolific prophetic book to talk about, A Beautiful Second Act. So we're on to chapter 4, the title of which, Dedicated Mothers Who Embodied Love in the Trenches. Tell us about this chapter, Miss.
That is such a good chapter. First of all, I think that you are a fangirl of Mother Teresa, of Saint Teresa of Calcutta.
It's kind of hard not to be. She's
I
kind of
know.
a rock star.
She's beautiful. So she's a saint already, but she was already, I mean, the work that she was doing was really truly in the trenches. And so I thought, let me pair her with a lesser known saint who was kind of doing the same thing but deserved a lot of attention, and that is Saint Marianne Cope. And oh my goodness, when I discovered her, actually, I kind of discovered her by accident. I think that we're all familiar with Saint Damien of Molokai, and he had an assistant who carried on his work, or an assistant, not necessarily an assistant. She picked up where he left off. Um, and so it's a beautiful story. One of my daughters is an ER nurse, and she's up in New York, very close to Syracuse, where Saint Marianne Cope uh, worked and where she developed the hospital system and the nursing system as we know it today. So she was an educator, and because she was such an efficient administrator in education, she kind of moved over to administer the local hospitals, and before you knew it, she was running the show. And that's what you got to love in a saint, people who just see a need and go and jump right in with both feet and both hands and their brains and big brain energy and just get the job done, right? And so she was just amazing.
She was, and so brave. Like that's that's a death sentence back then, right? Like Marianne
I
Coco.
know.
Like I'm just gonna go work with the lepers. I don't think that'll be a problem at all.
I
Like
I
that'll
know.
turn out well.
It's just crazy. And it was really, what was really wild is that Saint Damien was already in Hawaii working on the colony, in the colony, and just for our listeners to know, Hansen's disease is a virus that could easily be treated, and they didn't know. And so, I think that biblically it's called leprosy. And when you read, in scripture, we talk about the lepers, but the disease doesn't define the person. So it's just Hansen's disease today, which is still around in very rare cases. Um, but so St. Damien was working on this leper colony back in the early part of the century, and he was caught, um, he caught the disease himself. And so a couple of things were happening that coexisted. First of all, was Marianne Cope was working in New York at Syracuse, establishing the hospitals and establishing this nursing program. And the king of Hawaii found out about her success in the administration. And so he invited her to come to Hawaii to help set up their hospital system. And so she didn't originally go to Hawaii to join St. Damien. She went to Hawaii to do her own thing in the hospital system. And so she actually, the interlap of her ministry and St. Damien's ministry was, at the end of his life. She met him as he was dying. And then when he died, she took over the administration of the colony.
I'm trying to think if I could stay in Hawaii, but I had to live with on a leper colony. I might do it.
Oh, really?
Hawaii.
Well, you just take the antibiotics these days.
You just, you never know, right? So, Maria, I've known you for a very long time. I've been very blessed to know you for, and I always think I know everything about you until I read one of your books. And I was like, what? What are you doing now? So you were talking about, which my favorite line from the opening story is, there was nothing sanitized about this experience. Because you know how much I love germs. So you were talking about feeding and caring for in a shelter, correct?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Can you
yeah.
tell us about that story? It was so beautiful. Of course, I hone in on the one sentence
Oh,
that
the one sentence. Yeah, when I came up with that line, I don't even know. I'm sure this happens to you. You write a book and then you say, "Oh, did I write that?" I feel very Urkel doing this book club. But yeah, it was actually a very touching story and something that informed the way that I would teach and work in ministry for the rest of my life. When my kids were teenagers, they were working, through their youth group to do public, community service and whatever. And they needed a ride into Atlanta for work in a soup kitchen that was in downtown Atlanta. And they couldn't drive. They were 14, 15. They were in their confirmation prep. And so a bunch of parents got together. And, in those days, I was in the minivan because everybody was in a minivan. And so I'm like,
yes, we
yeah, I
were.
can, I can jam 7 teenagers into this car. Let's go. Let's do it. So a bunch of us got together to drive the teens over to the center. And, I thought that I was just going to get off scot free. I was going to park and then, maybe wander around the building or something. Nope. We were immediately conscripted by the director. And our task was very simple and one of the most difficult things I've done in my life. And I thought that I would just be kind of slopping soup into a bowl or doing the dishes in the back. No, I was serving the clients, the people who were coming into the center for lunch. And it was in fact soup, but there were also sandwiches. And we were instructed quite simply to recognize the humanity, to see the face of Christ in each person that came in. We were to make eye contact. We were to smile. We were to bring them 5 servings if that's what they wanted to eat. We were to try not to sneak extra food into their bags. They were allowed to bring containers and we could fill the containers, but either they had soup or they had sandwiches. And that's where I got into trouble because
So
as
unlike you.
so unlike me. Well, what happened is that a young mother came in with a toddler and a young child, maybe 5 or 6, and I was asked to take them to a separate dining room that was reserved for families that came in. And I sat the woman down with the two children, brought them some coloring pages, and she wouldn't look at me. She wouldn't look at me. Um, I'm sure from shame, from fear. I don't know what was in her heart. I know that I suffered through that meal with her because all I could do was think of my own children. All I could do was think of my nieces and nephews who were the age of those children, and it tore me up. And at the end, with some conversation and talking to some of the regular workers there, they said that not everyone is living on the streets. That a lot of people come, especially on the weekend, to supplement the food that they have by having a meal out at the center, or going to have the meal there and then bringing the sandwiches home that would be lunch the next day or something like that. And so I snuck some extra sandwiches into her bag and I got caught. And the look that I got from the woman, from the supervisor who caught me, was the most empathetic
Hmm.
exchange that we had. And I was undone. I spent like the next 20 minutes in the bathroom weeping
Oh, of course. Of
because it was just so much, and so when I use the word sanitized, it's easy to write a check.
yes.
it's easy. I worked for the St. Vincent de Paul Society at our parish once a month. It was easy to have people come in and go to the food pantry, and we had a prepackaged, um, two bags of groceries for them. And so that was sanitized. They were in. They usually just sent one person in. It was usually the mom who came in and picked up the groceries, said thank you, and went away. So I didn't actually see their pain and their suffering. And so it was an incredible lesson for me to look into the eyes of these people who are suffering and see a child of God, and to see Christ suffering in that moment. It was very powerful.
Which is why I pointed out that sentence, because it had absolutely nothing to do with cleanliness, except for Allison, who is a germaphobe, was like, ah. But
Yeah.
I love that in that moment, like the Lord always has so much more. Like we think we're going to do one thing, we think we're on the mission for one thing, and then the Lord's like, I have something so much bigger, so much. All you have to do is say yes. And I think that kind of leads pretty perfectly into Mother Teresa, who
Mm.
had that second act, right? That crazy call within a call on that train ride. And she's like, I'm already serving you. And he's like, talk about not sanitized. Like, I have
Yeah,
something even more important for you to do. And for her to be so brave and be like, Lord, yes. Uh, that's one of the reasons I love these women saints so much is you were celebrating, we're calling it Holy Women's History Month. I'm just so amazed at we used the word last time, moxie, right? That they're
hmm,
so brave and so obedient to the will of God. And that's what I admire the most, that they have that faith and that conviction, even when they're completely unsure what God's up to, that they're able to say, yes, Lord. So
I
tell us a
know.
little bit about Mother Teresa.
Well, I wanted to say, I wanted to add to that, that so much of the road that these women take, in the book, especially the saints, um, is, you think it's the work that they're doing for others, but it's really the work of their own sanctification. I was saved in that. I served 200 men and a woman and two little boys. But it was the Lord serving me and teaching me and feeding me spiritually. And so, a lot of times when we think that we don't have the stuff of saints in us, we do. We have these moments of grace throughout our lives, and we just need to be aware of them and seek them. So, Mother Teresa. What a second act.
Oh my goodness. I love like just some of the clips that you can find of her on YouTube. Just could listen to this woman preach
Ah,
so humbly all day long.
yeah, she was incredible. So I mean, she was a sister already, and she was moving I think it was Darjeeling for a retreat, and she had like this moment with Christ, where she just envisioned him saying, "I thirst," and she just knew that she had to move through and to do some work with the poor, and she quickly got through and founded the Sisters of Charity, and was able to work for the poor, with the poor, in India. I mean, we know that we knew that when she was alive that she was a saint. It was just a matter of getting that process.
And excuse my silly faces. The head of HR just walked by and made a face at me, and forgetting that I'm on camera because I often do that, I may or not stuck
Oh,
my tongue out at him and just realized you're talking about this very serious conversation, and I'm and
making faces at me.
now he's sitting there in the window. Anyway, we're gonna move on now. Sorry.
Amazing.
I just,
Amazing.
it's
This is
just
this is live action.
yeah, this is like how my brain works. Like, oh yeah, by the way, Allison, focus. Like, hello, ADHD in action. Anyway, yes, Mother Teresa is such an incredible second act and a role model for all of us. So, because we have two more chapters to go through, I'm going to stop making faces. I'm going to focus on what I'm doing
Just
here.
run through it.
Wait till I tell him later. He's going to laugh. because I felt for exactly what he wanted me to do. Anyway, this is the beauty of working with such fun people. People think that working in ministry is boring. It's not. We have a really good time. So, chapter 5, extraordinary artists, creatives who made the world better. So tell us about the women you chose to pair up for this chapter.
Well, I was living in Mobile at the time, and people along the Gulf Coast, close to Mississippi, close to Louisiana, knew Sister Thea Bowman um, for a long time.
Wow.
And so as her cause was being moved, she's a servant of God. She was just on my radar, and I think I spoke to you before. The saints kind of find me, and so I was kind of like in her backyard. And so she would pop up every once in a while, and I was like, "Well, who is this woman? She's such an interesting person." And I had to find somebody who was inspirational as an artist. And don't you know, I was an exhibit downtown, and there was some of the, I think it's called oh, I don't know what it's called. It's old like anyway, it was Grandma Moses. There's a name for that kind of art, but I saw a Grandma Moses exhibit, and I thought, there's my answer. Grandma Moses had a second act, like when she was in her 80s. She suffered from arthritis in her hands, and she was a very accomplished quilter. And I mean, I've lived in the South all my life, and I know that there are different parts of the country that have different specialties. And I've always seen um, quilts, and they're very expensive to purchase because they are so time consuming. Quilts are made from scraps of material, so you just take leftover materials from the sewings that for the clothes that you sew for your family or whatever,
Mm.
curtains that you might make, and you create these beautiful, intricate designs. And that's kind of like how we are. Like, as human beings, we belong to like this tapestry of humanity that's very beautiful. And so it's very intricate work. I think that Lisa Handy has taken up needlepoint.
Yes.
And I used to do needlepoint when I was a little girl, and then when I was first married and we were living in Germany, um, my husband would go away for 2, 3 weeks for training or for whatever it was that he was doing in the army, and the women would meet together for coffee in the evenings, and we would all be doing needlepoint. So I know
How
how
fun.
difficult, but it's very detailed. You have to get the knots just right. The stitches. There's different stitches for different, to create different things. And she was very good at that. And the arthritis kind of shut that down. And she was undeterred. She was like, I'm going to just take up painting because I can do it with my stiff fingers. And she was discovered by an art critic who, came along and says, "Oh, this primitive is the word I was looking for. This is this is a beautiful style, and this really captures, this woman's joy." 90 years old, she would paint these pictures, and then if it was a snowy picture, she would put glitter on it. And I thought, my gosh, isn't that like every 5-year-old girl across the world? 5, 90, it's the same thing. We love
Oh,
joy, we love beauty. And so she's such a beautiful match with Thea Bowman, who was an educator like me. And I think it bears to tell our readers that she was African American, and it's important to her story because part of her second act was really integrating the Black experience into the Catholic Mass and into the church. She lived in the 60s, the 70s, into the 80s. She died very young. I think she was 48 when she died, or 50, 51 or 52 when she died of breast cancer. But she grew up in the South in a time when she saw the effects of segregation, and in a time when she saw the beauty of what was the civil rights movement. And I think that her very last address to the USCCB, to the American bishops, was an appeal to to not allow but embrace, to bring into the church the lived Black experience. And so she had a beautiful voice, and and she created a songbook, a hymn book of of songs that were common, or that were the songs that were sung in the Black churches.
Oh,
And
wow.
and so, the whole thing that she was talking about was, we are the church too, and it's good to see ourselves in it. And I think that that's so true of everyone today. When you have a country that's made up of immigrants, um, you want to worship and see yourself in that worship. And I thought that it was just a beautiful, beautiful thing. And so I found her to be, um, just just filled with joy, like Grandma Moses with her little sprinkles. Thea Bowman was a singer. She sang. Her evangelization was joyful through song, and so I think that that is a very key part of our growing older, or entering into our second acts, which is to jump in with joy.
And you talk in the questions about thinking about your creative expression. Like everybody has some creative expression, and how beautiful that these women embrace that. Like, like just to be able to show the beauty of God's world either through song or through imagery, or through sprinkles. There's
Or
nothing wrong
through
with
sprinkles.
sprinkles.
What are your sprinkles? I should have put that in the questions at the end of the book. What do you sprinkle?
What does
I
Michael
guess
mean?
you sprinkle. Where is he? I know who you're talking to. I know who's making faces at you. What are you sprinkling at him?
This point was some sass. But I like to write. Like for me, that's a creative process, right? The Family Theater Productions is doing this incredible series on creativity, and they interviewed Lisa Hendy for the creativity of art, the beauty of art, of writing. And to look
Mhm.
at that, I write nonfiction, but to me, it's still my craft. It's still something I work at. It's a beautiful way of sharing the Lord, to people who might not actually see. Like, I think my gift is that I can read something and turn it into story. And some people need that to be able to comprehend the things of God. It's simply as I can put them. So I think everybody has some creativity, some gift, and to use it for his glory is where we're going to really shine, and where that gift will shine.
That's right. That's right. And I think that that's what we see in those two women.
Yes, 100%. So, chapter 6, champions of social. Well, before wait. Back up the train. What does your glitter look like?
What does my glitter look like? I think it's words. I think it's also words. I love to tell stories. I talk too much, and but I think that that's how, at least that's how I relate. And I mean, it makes sense that we're both writers here. Um, but yeah, I think that that's what I like to do. I like to connect with stories. I have a story for everything.
Yes, I do. I love stories. And I love, again, explaining difficult concepts through simple stories is one of my favorite things to do. And I used to be a preschool teacher, so it's probably where that skill kind of began to manifest itself in my life.
Well, you probably actually had glitter.
I did. I did a lot of glitter.
I stay away from it.
One of my favorite things used to be putting the glitter in a water bottle with some glycerin, and we make our own little, what do you call
Snow
it?
globes.
Snow globes, but we'd put in goofy colors and. Anyway, I had a lot of fun being a preschool teacher. Chapter 6, moving on. Champions of social justice who fought to protect and improve lives.
So traumatic. This is the hardest chapter for me to write.
Really?
Yes, because in it, I make a confession that the saint that I chose, servant of God, Dorothy Day, is not my favorite person. or I should say, was not my favorite person. And I have to tell you that I had to. Did you know what happened to me at the National Eucharistic Congress?
I may or may not have that in my notes to have you
Uh,
share
so
that.
so I admit to a bias in this book. And when I wrote my Badass Book of Saints, I started off that book talking about Saint Teresa of Avila, who is my patron saint. She's not my confirmation saint because I wasn't confirmed at an older age. I was confirmed as a child, as an infant, and so I didn't choose a saint. So I picked Saint Teresa of Avila as my patron saint when I was an adult, and everybody around me was talking about their confirmation saints, and I was like, I don't have one. So I didn't like Saint Teresa. My mother, my aunts, my mother-in-law, talk about a long-term punishment, were all educated in Carmelite school. And so every year they would have this Saint Teresa festival on her feast day, October 15th. And and I was dragged to it, because my mother would come and she'd say, "Oh, you're coming with me to show me off? I don't know. To make me like Saint Teresa? I don't know." The result was that I was surly and I didn't want any part of Saint Teresa at all. And she was following me around. And so I really came to appreciate Saint Teresa. And actually, if she hadn't been in the first book, she would have probably led in this book because all of her great work she did after the age of 50. You talk about having a grand second act. Saint Teresa built like 17 monasteries. She updated and renewed the Carmelite order, and so yeah, she was incredible. But I didn't like her at first, and now, of course, I love and adore her. Well, that's what happened to me with Dorothy Day. Dorothy Day, I have a bias because as a Cuban refugee in the early '60s, my parents were very knee-jerk reactive to anything that smelled of or looked like communism, and it's very close and adjacent socialist movement. And so I grew up with that bias that it's terrible, that it's wrong, that it's awful, and I mean I still think it is. But the Catholic worker movement, which was co-founded by Dorothy Day, um, had the stigma of socialism. And so and it wasn't, but I didn't discover this until right at the end as I was writing this chapter,
Oh, wow.
because I knew I had to include Dorothy Day in it. People had always asked me, why is she not included in your books? And it's like, because I don't like her. And the truth is, I didn't understand her. And what happened is that I read her biography, her autobiography, The Long Loneliness. And in it, I discovered the real Dorothy Day, not the Dorothy Day that was disparaged by my parents, not the Dorothy Day that I assumed based on, one isolated quote that I had seen somewhere, but the actual living, breathing woman. And I was moved by this statement that she made, that they did not begin their day of work without first the Eucharist by going to Mass and then praying the Rosary. And
Wow.
our connection to the Rosary at Holy Cross Family Ministries is through Venerable Father Patrick Peyton, and who said, "A world at prayer is a world at
That
peace." And so I thought, oh my goodness, how have I missed this detail about her? It changed everything. I did a 180 on my appreciation for Dorothy Day. And the reason that I include her in the book, besides the fact that she deserves to be in it, is that I think it's important for us as we encounter saints and as we start to learn about them, that they don't all have to vibe with us.
yes.
There's a saint for everyone out there, and they were holy people, holy men and women, and that's enough. That's enough. So I was really, really dramatically turned around by her, and I paired her with a living woman.
Well,
Hell,
wait a minute. Did you
oh,
tell your National Eucharistic Congress story?
Oh, yeah, I should tell that, right?
I
So
think you should. Yes.
so we were there and we were volunteering. Holy Cross Family Ministries had put on a production with pop checks for families, and there were many stations that the families had to walk through, and we had volunteers at all of the stations, and I was like the volunteer runner, so I was going from station to station, making sure that everyone was in their place, but also, if they needed anything, if we needed to, catch up on supplies, whatever. And I kept making eye contact with one of the volunteers. And it was like to the point of it was a little awkward. So like why is she staring at me? And she must have been thinking, why is she staring at me? It was just funny. So during a break, I came up and I sat with her and another young woman that seemed to be her partner that was working with her on that particular set. And we sat down, and it was really comfortable because we were sitting in one of the little living room settings that were part of the exhibit. And it was funny because I'm wearing the credentials for the Congress, and so my name's on it. And the young woman says to me, "Oh, I just read a book by Maria Johnson." And I thought, "That's interesting. I write books. What book was it?" Well, it was the Badass book. And
Oh, that's funny.
and I laughed and I said, "Oh, that's hilarious." And she's made some comment about Saint Teresa and not being my favorite. And I said, "Yeah, I seem to have repeated the same thing because I'm working on a chapter about Dorothy Day, and I can't stand her." And the woman that I had been making eye contact with, just kind of everything in her body just kind of shut down. And I looked at her and I said, "No, no, no, no. If you're a fan of Dorothy Day, never fear. I was convicted." And so I have a great, great appreciation for her today. She is the director of the cause for her canonization.
That's crazy. Like
Yeah,
that's
so she
best
invited
God
me.
sent.
So she
Love that.
invited me to dinner with Dorothy Day's granddaughter, who happened to be there. So I had dinner with Dorothy Day's granddaughter.
This is the best God sentence. Like I just love that when the Lord just like, hey, this is
I have
they
a
couldn't make that happen if you
surprise.
tried. So you got to meet and have dinner with her granddaughter. Like that's insane. Who gets to
That's
do
right.
those things?
Well, me.
Yes, which is phenomenal. To put that in your next book.
I
So
will. I
you
will.
paired Dorothy Day with
With Helen Alvarez, who is a professor of law at George Mason University. Um, and she writes about family law. And she writes about the human dignity. And I happened to have been at the National Catholic Prayer Breakfast last year when she received the Christa Fidelis Award. And so she gave an acceptance speech that was a really hilarious top 10 of what she's learned in Catholic ministry in,
oh,
in
that's
the
funny.
style of David Letterman. So it
That's
was
awesome.
it was it was a funny list, but I was very moved by one of the points in her list, which was not a funny point at all, because she talked about being a speedster and about having bad hair. Um, so that was funny. But her point, I think it was number 4 actually, was first be a disciple. And those, I mean, I could probably needlepoint those words onto a pillow right now, because you can't do, and we can't do our work at Catholic Mom and at Family Rosary, if we're not first right with the Lord.
Yeah.
How can we take His message into the world if we don't know that message? How can we feed other people if we're not fed? And so, first be a disciple struck me. And here's the order of it. That statement struck me hard, so much so that I wrote about her. But it prepared me to understand Dorothy Day,
Interesting.
because she did not go out into the world and do her work without first receiving the Eucharist and praying the Rosary. So first, be a disciple.
It's amazing. I've been trying to make every morning, even if it's just 15, 5, 10, 15 minutes, of prayer and rooting my day in Christ. And sometimes some of the things that I need answers to, which are work related, come out in the morning prayer, and I'm always amazed. Like,
Mhm.
I don't know why I continue to be amazed by what God does, because He is amazing. But and I think that's what keeps it fresh, right? Like that, I don't expect these things from God, and I'm always amazed and just blown away by His love, His attention, His mercy, His kindness, all those things that I've been taught that God is, but that I didn't maybe internalize for a very long time. And in my second act, which is, going and becoming an evangelist, this is what I've discovered: a God that is just so incredibly loving. And I am thrilled with the women you've shared so far. And next week, we're going to pack in 4 chapters and learn about 8 more women. So I'm excited to get back together next Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern Time. And of course, you can watch these recordings or on our podcast, extra content on the Catholic Mom Cast. Maria, as always, a pleasure, and just love learning new things about you and the incredible women that you share with us.
Thank you. And I'll see you guys next week.
Thank you for joining us, and God bless. We're off. Oh my gosh, I'm